About 2 years ago, I made a video about Dark Souls 2. I'm sure a few of you have seen it. Then, about a year afterwards, I made a follow-up video discussing the opposites of the first. The first of these two videos took off, and is now cemented in YouTube history as yet another Dark Souls 2 is good video. Though, Asmongold hasn't reacted to it yet, so I don't know, maybe not. Since those videos released, a lot has happened in my life. My perspectives have changed, and I've been hearing a metric ton of thoughts from you guys. I've never quite felt like my tenure with Dark Souls 2 has ever quite been over, so now I think I'll finally try and make it there. And what a better way to do that than by responding to some of your comments. I've received thousands of them since that first video released, and I've read a good amount of them. Using those comments, I'm going to wrap up my thoughts on Dark Souls 2 for good. Okay, so obviously I'm not going to respond to every single comment. The ones I do look at will be very cherry-picked. 3 of them will be direct comments, and 2 are collections of comments all mentioning around the same thing. Before I get into any of those though, I want to mention a key detail behind the production of the first Dark Souls 2 video. When I made that video, it was extremely hasty, at least as hasty as I could have been at the time. I had previously uploaded a video on Elden Ring that kinda took off, and I wanted to try to hold that high. As a result, many things got rushed. These include, but are not limited to, the segment on the story, the footage itself, the builds I used, and much more. I say this because these things have all wandered their way into a large portion of that video's comment section. It would have been a pain to have addressed each of them individually, so tossing them in here under that blanket explanation was to save me a headache. Just know, if you ever complained about me only using one build, being very bad at recalling the story, or in general, seeming like I missed something, it's because I was rushing. Whoops. As for the rest of the discussion, let's take a look at the comments and start there. The first comment I want to discuss is this one by Emelec. It talks a bit about the story, but the main idea is that the endings to the game present an entirely different view on the cycle of light and dark. Aldia's ending being a total abandonment of the cycle in favor of personal freedoms, choosing instead to abandon your fate and move on with your life, as they put it. Thanks to the aforementioned rushing, I based my story segment purely on what I remembered from dialogue, which, to be honest, was wildly incorrect. I got a lot of comments like this, but Emelec's was among the first and more prominent to correct my statements. To give an updated thought on the story endings of Dark Souls 2, I really love this new path you can take. Instead of perpetuating the cycle, at least not directly, you choose a path of your own to take, one that is truly what you want, not something that you've been pressured to do by anyone else. Aldia helps guide you to that conclusion, and finishing Vendrick's side quest first makes it that much cooler, surpassing your fate as the bearer of the curse, going on to rule your own age, or really do whatever it is that you wish to, and by doing so, allowing another to decide the fate of the cycle. My current take on the overall story of Dark Souls 2 is that it revolves less around the cycle and more around the kingdom of Draenleic and the 3 other kingdoms that stood by it. It was more a tale of the valiant men who ruled these kingdoms, their sacrifices and eventual downfalls, some at the hands of corruption spread from their closest ally, others from their attempts to stop that corruption, and one who strove to stop evil at its very source. This next comment is from Sigdowner. To summarize it, they mentioned that they actually enjoy the placement of enemies throughout Dark Souls 2. A big part of this is the design of the area being the challenge instead of the boss at the end, needing to carefully pick away at it and improve there before improving at the boss, encouraging you to take your time rather than just blow through everything. This is a take that I'm sure some people would be shocked to hear that I agree with. A lot of my comments on the enemy placement 2 years ago were based on recent playthroughs I had done well past my first experiences with the game. This was at a point where I had done the slow trud through each area enough times to just want to get to the bosses in progression. That was the main thing that I loved about the games at the time. So after getting my first tastes, running through areas became the play, as I really wasn't interested in taking the slow tactical approach every single time. The comment about the game teaching you to run past things was something I caught from a video on Dark Souls 2, but today I really couldn't tell you which one it was. While I still dislike some of the placements that Scholar uses, I don't entirely believe the placements to be that bad anymore. I heavily agree with the observation that the game's areas are more the challenge than its bosses are. I'm still critical of some placements, those being the ones that are more clustered or poorly thought out, being more checkpoint based than actual diegetic additions to the area. Hides is my go-to example of this, as it feels rather stop and go the entire way through. My defense for that area's placements would be the similarities it has with the Dragon Shrine. That area is a gauntlet of challenges you need to do one at a time before progressing. This lets you earn the Keeper's respect before talking with the Ancient Dragon. Hides seems similar, just lacking the small guys and the entire place being in ruins. It wouldn't be much of a stretch to say that a similar ruling used to be in place here lore-wise. This would make the stop-and-go placements make much more sense. However, because that's a conclusion drawn from a cross-comparison and estimation, I'm not sure if I want to entertain it myself. As such, I'm still not a huge fan of the area's placements. In a similar vein, the Iron Keep also exists, and is a far worse example as those enemies really are just stop and go. Following that, we have a comment from Francis Sebastian Sampson 8561. I don't actually aim to respond to the whole comment, but I do disagree with one particular part of it. To summarize the comment itself, Francis mentions some things that people hate about Dark Souls 2. Their 3 points being the need to approach areas methodically, have a good build, and use versatility in your weapon choices, specifically having a long-range option in your kit. The comment itself isn't wrong inherently. My disagreement comes from the word need. I do not believe you should need anything specifically to play through a Souls game. One of the biggest reasons I love the series is its lack of necessity when it comes to building your character. You can make several different types of builds, but you aren't railroaded into one or the other. You experiment, find a build that fits your playstyle, and attack the game with it. From the very start, everything going forward is up to you. More versatile builds make the challenges easier, but aren't necessary for progression. Dark Souls 2 is the exact same. You aren't forced at any time into any particular build or style. To say this game requires a good build is to say that it is lying about its core design. I would instead say that Dark Souls 2 encourages more varied builds, ones that can multitask or multi-class effectively to meet the needs of different challenges. It also encourages making builds more specific to themselves, as in, if you have a strength build, you can modify it so it's the best strength build that it can possibly be. Of course though, you don't need this. My brain-dead playstyle for the last 3 years is a testament to that. There is only one spot in the entire game where you are expected to change your approach. It is also my least favorite enemy placement in the entire game. I mentioned this in my second video on Dark Souls 2. These bugs block your path and degrade your gear if you stand in the spores they spew out. I very incorrectly stated that you need to unequip your armor to deal with them. You can do that, but you can also use a bow, ranged spells, or consumable items to surpass them. This is the only spot in all of Dark Souls 2 that stops you like this and demands a different approach. There are other spaces that benefit from having long-ranged options, but I really hate the idea that they're necessary. The next comment isn't any particular one, it's just one I see a lot. It's also a quickie, so I won't blabber about it too much. I see a ton of people timestamping the 4-minute mark where I kited basically all of hides to one location while talking about enemy placement. I didn't do a grand job explaining what I was showing, and that is evident by these comments. The take on enemy placement is something I've already addressed, but this particular piece of footage was meant to represent the clustering issue, showcasing just how many enemies were in a small area and how far their aggro range is. To dive into it a bit more, this shows again that you are meant to approach the areas slowly, being punished with basically instant death if you rush through. What I should have shown to help my point is footage of me calmly fighting an enemy just for another one to suddenly aggro on me even if I couldn't see it first. The Shrine of Amana being a great example of a space containing this issue. I mostly just wanted to clear the air that this footage was intentional and not a byproduct of my playstyle. The last comment I want to mention is another one that I see a lot, so picking out any particular one is very difficult. This one was the catalyst for my second video on the game, though not the one that actually saw the light of day. These are the comments about Dark Souls 2 being a good game, but a bad Souls game. I could not disagree more. Dark Souls 2 is a very different Souls game, that much is true. I won't deny that it's the black sheep of the series, but comments about it being the weakest or the worst of the three are entirely subjective. To present it as objective is entirely false and perpetuates the whole reason I made these videos to begin with. Dark Souls 2 is a great Souls game. It expands on so much of Dark Souls and Demon Souls, seeking to improve the gameplay loop while broadening what you can do as the player. It provides you with more stats to level, allowing more specific build styles. As stated before, it also increases build variety. The world has so much more going on in it. Out of all the three, it feels like the most complete game. The first game was rushed out the door, this much is true. We never got to see what it was meant to be like at full power, but we did get a glimpse from the early game. The third game was more direct and linear, still being great, but lacking in that environmental substance that made exploration so fun in the previous titles. Dark Souls 2 has tons of areas, each having great depth to them. You need to branch out from Majula in several different directions to find your way through the game. Along the way, seeing vibrant areas that all share common themes but are incredibly distinct from one another. Dark Souls 2 also doesn't fall off at a random point in time. Yeah, the endgame does get a bit weaker, it starts to feel a bit more rushed, but it's not so much so that you can basically see through the facade. 2 also sought to mend issues the first game had, summoning being made friendlier for groups of people who want to play together. Random encounters were increased, which made the idea of there being multiple worlds way more believable. It didn't always succeed at doing these things, but it tried, and that is what I love the most about it. Dark Souls 2 tried to improve on the Souls formula, and I'd say that it succeeded. Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring then went on to improve it further. To end this video off, I want to re-mention why I made the first Dark Souls 2 video. I made it in response to the multitudes of people who were encouraging others to skip it. That pretty much is the only reason why I went to that game's defense. Nowadays, I would say that it is still underrated by some, but not most, and absolutely not criminally. That title from the very beginning was misleading. Yes, it was clickbait. I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't. In fact, this video's title is exceptionally clickbait, and that is by design. I wanted to have people see that video, to hear my core message about giving the game a shot. I still and always will say that to anyone who hasn't yet made up their minds about playing Dark Souls 2. And to those who have, I do suggest giving it another shot, or at least a shot in general. It isn't everyone's cup of tea, and I do not want it to be. I just want to hear more discussion that isn't either flat hate or praise with no depth, or comments that came straight from the mouth of another YouTuber. I really hate seeing comments that tell people to essentially get their opinions from others. I see so many, specifically in reference to Mauler's videos on Dark Souls 2. I think people should watch those videos, but I also think they should play the game itself. There is a point where what you hear and what you experience differ. That is a point I need more people to get to. Not just with Dark Souls 2, but with anything and everything. I never wanted to critique this game, and I never will. I don't think I need to. I just wanted to share my thoughts on this thing. What I want to present to you is a recommendation, not a review. So please, if you haven't already and are interested, play Dark Souls 2. I promise, it is a really fun game.